I was standing at the airport check-in counter, passport in hand, suitcase packed, finally believing, for once, that something was actually meant for me. Then the agent looked up and said, "Sorry, this reservation isn't in your name." I'm Elena, and that was the moment I realized my dream vacation had been given to my sister by my own parents. But instead of yelling or crying, I walked away. And what I did next, quietly, methodically, changed everything. Have you ever been the one who always shows up, always pays, always helps, until you just don't? Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent or finally drawn the line? I could tell something was off the moment Mom tilted her phone to just the right angle and smiled like she had rehearsed it. "Sweetie," she sang, "we have a surprise." Her voice was warm but too polished, like wrapping paper over a gift you didn't ask for. I saw Dad sitting stiffly in the background, nodding like he wasn't quite sure why we were doing this. And then there was Rachel, appearing halfway through the call with one of her twins on her hip and the other wailing off screen. Chaos followed her like a shadow, and she didn't seem to mind. They told me they'd booked a vacation. For me. 4 nights at a beach resort, everything covered, all expenses paid. "You work so hard," Mom said, clasping her hands. "You never take time for yourself." Her smile didn't waver, but something in me did. My family doesn't give. Not really. Not without reminding you of the cost. Still, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to think maybe they'd noticed, just this once, that all the birthdays I remembered, the babysitting I agreed to last minute, the rides to doctor's appointments, I thought maybe they'd finally seen me, not just what I could do for them. After the call ended, I sat for a long time in the quiet of my apartment. The sun stretched across the carpet in slow-moving lines. The air smelled faintly of rosemary from the plant on my windowsill. I got up and opened my laptop. I didn't even hesitate. Within an hour, I had a new tab open for beachwear. I ordered SPF lip balm and a wide-brimmed straw hat. I splurged on a carry-on suitcase, pastel blue, firm-shelled, the kind I'd seen people roll effortlessly through airports. I added sunglasses I knew I'd probably lose, but didn't care. I printed out the itinerary Mom had emailed me. The confirmation numbers looked legitimate. I even checked the resort online. It was real. Ocean view, complimentary breakfast, white sand beaches that looked soft as cake flour. I requested time off from work and marked it on my calendar with a little star. I bought a paperback I'd meant to read 3 summers ago and placed it next to my suitcase. The suitcase looked so perfect sitting there, like it belonged to a woman who chose things for herself. When I looked in the mirror later that night, I caught myself smiling. Not a polite family photo smile, a real one. It curved gently, shyly, like it had been waiting years to be invited back. I touched my face without meaning to, almost as if I didn't recognize it. It felt strange to hope, to expect. But that was the thing about hope. It crept in the quiet, growing slowly like ivy. Later that evening, I opened the itinerary again, just to admire it. That's when I noticed it. A typo, just a single wrong letter in the last name. Nothing huge, nothing worth worrying over. I tilted my head and stared at it, then closed the email. I didn't delete it. Instead, I left it open in another tab while the sun outside faded into orange, and my suitcase waited quietly by the door. I arrived early, just the way I always do. My new suitcase rolled smoothly beside me, the pale blue surface catching the terminal lights. I had my passport in one hand and the printed itinerary in the other. I wore my favorite gray hoodie, soft at the cuffs, broken in around the elbows. It made me feel steady. The terminal buzzed with a kind of eager movement. Families clustered around kiosks. A toddler cried somewhere behind me. A TSA agent barked directions in a flat, rehearsed tone. I stood in line humming to myself, letting the rhythm of wheels and footsteps fill my chest. When I reached the counter, I passed over my documents with a smile. The agent, a woman about my age, scanned the itinerary first. Her fingers hesitated over the screen. "I'm sorry," she said, polite but firm. "There's no reservation under this name." I blinked. "Could you check again? I printed the confirmation." She gave a small, apologetic tilt of the head. "This booking is under Rachel Moore and guests." My smile faltered. My hands tightened around the paper. "That's my sister," I said slowly. "She wasn't... this trip was for me." The agent offered a soft shrug. "I can't do anything without a matching ID." I stepped aside, my body moving before my thoughts could catch up. I dug out my phone, opened the email again. The same itinerary, same dates. My name, Elena, on the email thread, not the reservation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Maybe I could call Mom. Maybe this was just a clerical error? Then I saw her. Rachel, breezing through the concourse with both kids in tow, one of them dragging a plastic dinosaur, the other already licking a popsicle. Her ponytail bounced with each step. My beach tote, my tote, swung from her shoulder like it had always been hers. She looked up and met my eyes and smiled. It wasn't a sheepish smile. It wasn't guilty or apologetic. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've already won the argument and moved on. Behind her, I saw Mom and Dad standing by the gate. Mom clapped her hands together like a cruise director. Dad checked something on his phone, not looking up. I walked toward them. My steps felt heavier than they should have. Rachel didn't flinch. "Oh, hey," she said. "I thought you'd be here earlier. The gate's about to close." I turned to Mom. "You said this trip was for me." She hesitated, just a beat. Then she softened her voice. "Don't be mad, sweetheart. We just thought Rachel could really use the break. You're always working anyway. The kids have never been to the beach." Always working. Like that made me less human. Rachel chimed in. "Honestly, I'd give it back if I could, but the kids are so excited. Maybe you can go next time." My fingers curled tighter around the itinerary. The edges crinkled under the pressure. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I turned and walked away, the sounds of the terminal growing louder behind me. Wheels on tile, overhead chimes, announcements for flights I wasn't on. I walked with the kind of stillness that comes from years of being expected to absorb the shock. Outside, the air felt cooler. My lungs pulled it in like water. I flagged a cab, slid inside, and gave the driver my address without looking up. Back home, I dropped my keys on the kitchen table and sat down, the apartment dim and familiar. I reached for my laptop. The itinerary email was still open. That's when I saw it. A forwarded message, buried 2 replies deep. "We've decided to put Rachel and the kids on instead of Elena. She won't mind. Honestly, she's always working. This way it's less complicated." My name erased, my presence assumed, my silence expected. I closed the email, not with a slam, but with a click. And then I sat there for a long time, listening to nothing but the soft hum of the fridge and the distant sound of my own breathing. The apartment felt different that night. Same furniture, same muted walls, same rosemary plant on the sill, but the air had changed. I left the lights off, letting the dusk bleed through the blinds. The heat hung heavy in the room, but I didn't bother with the fan. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, not out of anger, not even out of curiosity, just instinct. The email thread was still open. The forwarded message now burned into my memory. "She won't mind. Honestly, she's always working. This way it's less complicated." My name had been replaced without hesitation, like I was just another line item shuffled off the spreadsheet. I closed the tab and opened another. Banking. Line after line of transactions loaded slowly. Groceries for Mom when she said her PIN stopped working. $85 here, $120 there. A Venmo to Rachel for kids' camp deposit. Then the big ones. $400 to help with a broken washer. $250 for car trouble. A $300 transfer labeled Family Vacation Fund, which now felt like a joke. I kept scrolling, tallying numbers in a spreadsheet I titled quietly, "Things They Forgot I Paid For." By the time I was done, it added up to more than $16,000. 3 years of quiet helping, not a single repayment, not even a thank you. It wasn't generosity, it was expectation. I hadn't been supporting them, I'd been cushioning them. I clicked open another tab, new bank account, no shared access, no saved beneficiaries. I moved everything, checking, savings, emergency fund. Every dollar gone from the joint threads they never even noticed I'd woven. Next table, work portal. I updated my emergency contacts, removing both parents, added my own name instead. I updated my mailing address to pending relocation. That wasn't a lie. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I wasn't staying. Then I opened the USPS website, filed a change of address request. My current address would forward mail to a P.O. box I'd just signed up for that morning. One more thread cut. No tears, no anger. Just clean, mechanical movement, like pulling cords from a wall. I looked around the apartment. It was silent, but not empty. The quiet felt earned. This wasn't collapse. This was escape. I stood up and poured myself a glass of water. The ice cracked sharply as it hit the glass. I drank slowly, letting each sip anchor me in the present. Back at the table, I reached for the shelter flyer I'd picked up weeks ago, the one I'd never quite thrown away. There was a gray kitten listed on the last page, last of her litter. Cautious but curious, one torn ear. I liked that she didn't come perfect. I found her profile on the website. Her name was Fig. I clicked apply. A few minutes later, I closed the laptop, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for anyone but myself. No one knew where I'd gone. There were no goodbyes, no cryptic notes, just a change of address form and the absence of my name on their phone screens. That was the point. Ashland welcomed me like a town that didn't ask questions. The air smelled different here, cooler, softer. Mornings came with a pale fog that curled around rooftops and faded by noon. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a weathered brownstone above a sleepy bookstore. The stairs creaked. The plumbing sighed, but the windows faced east, and each morning sunlight stretched long and warm across the floorboards like it was trying to reach me. The first thing I bought was a cherrywood coffee table. It was heavier than I expected, and I hauled it up the stairs myself, inch by inch. Its legs were carved, not too fancy, but enough to feel chosen. I picked linen curtains that let the light through and placed a row of herbs along the windowsill. Basil, thyme, a stubborn mint that leaned toward the sun with a kind of quiet ambition. I watered them slowly, carefully. I wasn't in a rush. A few days later, I visited the local animal shelter. There were dozens of kittens, all eager and soft and purring. But one sat in the corner of her crate, head low, ears alert. She was gray with one torn ear and sharp yellow eyes. "She's a bit difficult," the volunteer warned. I reached out anyway. She didn't flinch, just stared. I named her Fig before we got home. We learned each other's rhythm. Fig liked the windowsill in the afternoon. She didn't mind when I talked to her while I made tea or rearranged my bookshelf for the 3rd time in a week. I set up a small workspace near the kitchen, took on a few freelance projects. Nothing too demanding. One of the local cafes needed help with their website. I liked the quiet steadiness of coding while a kettle hummed in the background. Each morning became a pattern. Wake before sunrise, feed Fig, water the herbs, steep a cup of ginger tea. Sometimes I would sit for an hour and do nothing but listen to the floorboards settle. One fog-heavy morning, I opened my laptop and, without much thought, began typing. I didn't plan the words. They just arrived. What happens when you stop giving? The post wasn't long, just a small unraveling of what I'd carried, what I'd handed over without question. I didn't name anyone. I didn't have to. It was more a letter to myself than anyone else. When I finished, I hovered over the publish button. My hand didn't shake. Click. Then I closed the screen and went back to my tea. Fig hopped onto the chair beside me, blinking slowly. The fog outside was still thick, clinging to the tops of pine trees. By the next morning, my inbox had started to hum. It didn't take long for them to notice the silence. Not the kind that comes after a fight, loud with tension and waiting, but a stillness that stretched, wide and firm. Just a few unpaid bills here, a grocery run that didn't get covered there, an empty reply bubble, a dinner reservation missed because no one sent the reminder. My absence wasn't loud, but it was felt. In Sacramento, Rachel tried texting. Twice, then 3 more times over the next week. She started with casual, "Hey babe, can you spot me till payday?" Then a guilt-tinged, "The twins miss you." Finally, she switched tactics. Instagram stories with black backgrounds and white text. It's always the ones who shout boundaries that forget who held them up when they were falling. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Her card declined at the uniform shop when buying school clothes for the twins. The clerk waited politely while Rachel fumbled, finally handing over a different card, lips tight. An hour later, another story. Funny how people switch up when they get healed. Meanwhile, Mom's Pilates sessions stopped showing up on the instructor's calendar. The grocery delivery she placed weekly didn't process. She tried using Dad's card. It bounced. The brunch club at church noticed she didn't bring her usual fruit tart. "Tight month," she told them, smiling too wide. When someone asked about me, she changed the subject. At home, she sat in her kitchen and wrote me a letter. Pink stationery, cursive loops, the kind she used when I was young and she wanted to soften bad news. "We miss you. Things are harder without you. Please come home. Love, Mom." She sealed it, no return address. Just my name and the town I'd listed when I changed everything. It arrived 3 days later. I knew the handwriting before I opened the mailbox. I didn't read it. I rested it next to the tea towels in the drawer and closed it gently. Back in Ashland, the fog had rolled in, thicker that week. Fig sat curled in the corner of the windowsill, tail flicking lazily. The herbs on the sill leaned toward the dim light. I poured myself a cup of tea and opened my inbox. Hundreds of messages. I thought I was the only one. "You said everything I never could." This made me feel less alone. Some were long, telling stories of mothers who manipulated gently, sisters who guilted with smiles, lives quietly chipped away by obligation. Others were short. One just read, "Thank you for naming it." I read them all slowly, sometimes pausing to breathe. My silence hadn't created distance. It had become connection. Each message echoed what I hadn't even meant to start. A community born not from outrage, but from the quiet decision to stop pouring from an empty cup. Later that evening, I sat with my journal. Fig hopped into my lap. I wrote one sentence, then underlined it twice. "They don't miss me. They miss what I did for them." When I closed the notebook, I saw the email subject line sitting near the top of my inbox. It wasn't from a stranger. Pale pink. Familiar font. No return address. The letter arrived tucked between a grocery flyer and the electric bill. Pale pink envelope, slightly smudged. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Those soft loops, the flourished capitals. It hadn't changed since she used to leave notes in my lunchbox. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the kitchen counter beside the lemons and turned back to the sink. The water was still running. The apartment smelled of eucalyptus and rising bread dough. When I finally sat down, I slit the envelope open with a butter knife, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was a photograph. Me and Rachel, maybe 6 and 4, standing on the beach. Our cheeks were sunburned, our smiles lopsided. I could still feel the sand in my shoes from that day. Folded behind it was a short note. "We miss you. Things are harder without you. Please come home. Love, Mom." No apology, no acknowledgement, just another gentle tug, wrapped in familiar softness. I stared at the words, not with anger, but with a kind of weary understanding. The tone hadn't changed, only the ask. I refolded the note, placed the photo back inside, and slid the envelope into the back of the drawer beneath the tea towels. That drawer had become a resting place for things I didn't need but wasn't ready to throw away. I opened the windows to let in the afternoon breeze. The town outside hummed gently. Someone wheeling a bicycle, a child laughing on the sidewalk. Nothing urgent, nothing directed at me. I lit a candle on the windowsill. Eucalyptus and clove. Fig stretched beneath the table and let out a small huff. Her paws curled like commas in a sentence I hadn't finished yet. Dinner was simple. Lentil stew, crusty bread, a drizzle of good olive oil. I didn't rush. I stirred slowly, tasted as I went. It didn't have to be impressive. It only had to be mine. Afterward, I opened my laptop one more time and started typing. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not coming back. It wasn't a declaration, just a statement. A truth I didn't need anyone to agree with. I published it quietly. No tags, no caption. Then I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the late spring light stretch across the floor. The mint in the windowsill looked healthy again, strong. It leaned toward the sun without apology. I thought about how many years I spent being the reliable one, the fixer, the soft landing, how I folded myself smaller to make room for everyone else's chaos, how I called it love. But choosing peace doesn't mean turning cold. It means turning inward. Some endings don't need closure. They just need quiet. The phone didn't ring, and I didn't wait for it. Some letters don't need to be answered. That pale pink envelope reminded me not of who I'd lost, but of who I'd finally become when I chose stillness over struggle. Sometimes walking away isn't about bitterness. It's about healing. In families, love can quietly turn into obligation, and silence becomes the only way to be heard. True peace comes when we stop shrinking to fit into spaces we've outgrown. If this story made you think of your own quiet boundaries or moments of clarity, I'd love to hear what it stirred in you. Feel free to share your thoughts. Sometimes telling your story is the first step to reclaiming it.